In the quiet outskirts of town, Sarah found an abandoned puppy crying incessantly, curled up by the roadside. The poor creature's relentless wails tugged at her heart, prompting her to rush it to the nearby vet. She expected a simple diagnosis, perhaps hunger or injury. Instead, what the ultrasound revealed left the vet in shocked disbelief. His haunting words, "How could you?" echoed through the room, filling Sarah with an urgent dread. Sarah watched as the vet performed various tests on the puppy, his expression growing more troubled with each passing minute. The sterile smell of the clinic mingled with the anxious atmosphere, only amplifying her concern. She paced the room, her eyes fixed on the vet's furrowed brow. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. He offered no reassuring smile, which made her heart sink further. Throughout the examination, the puppy whimpered continuously. Sarah, feeling a bond form, decided to name him Oliver. "Hang in there, Oliver," she whispered, gently stroking his fur. Oliver's eyes were wide, filled with fear and pain. The vet's hands moved methodically but quickly, each beep and click of the machinery sending waves of anxiety through Sarah. She wanted to hold Oliver close, to comfort him, but could only watch. Midway through the procedures, the vet's demeanor shifted noticeably. What started as professional concern turned into visible distress. Sarah noticed how his hands trembled, his face going pale. He avoided eye contact, focusing solely on the screen in front of him. "Doc, what's going on?" Sarah asked, unable to hide her impatience. He didn't respond immediately, leaving her in the dark and ramping up her anxiety even more. With a terse nod, the vet stepped out of the room, pulling out his phone. Sarah watched as he made a quick call, his back turned. Her stomach churned as she tried to catch bits and pieces of his hushed conversation. "What's happening?" she whispered to herself, feeling a cold sweat form on her brow. A few minutes later, he re-entered, his face more solemn than before, leaving Sarah agitated. Another vet technician entered the room, moving quickly toward the scanning equipment. Sarah watched them work together, their eyes fixed on the monitor. The technician's focus was intense, her fingers flying over the buttons as various scans illuminated the screen. Oliver's small body shivered under their touch, his whimpers never ceasing. Each new image seemed to paint a grimmer picture, deepening Sarah's growing sense of dread without giving her any answers. Sarah's mind flashed back to the moment she found Oliver by the roadside. She remembered seeing a car speed away just moments before. Maybe it's important, she thought, and decided to share this detail. "Excuse me, doctor?" she questioned, breaking the silence. "I saw a car take off just before I found him. Could that help?" The vet paused, listening, but his expression remained cryptic, making her wonder what he knew. The vet listened to Sarah's revelation about the speeding car, but chose not to expand on it. He only nodded, his face a mask of professional neutrality. "We're doing our best," he said, not offering much more. His cryptic demeanor only added to Sarah's frustration. She felt like she wasn't being told the full story, and the uncertainty gnawed at her insides. Oliver's faint whimpers continued as they worked on him. Despite the vet's assurances, Sarah's worry gnawed at her, refusing to ease up. She glanced down at Oliver, his small frame trembling on the examination table. "I'm here, buddy," she whispered, trying to comfort him from a distance. Oliver's wide, fearful eyes met hers, and she wished there was more she could do. The room seemed colder, and every moment felt stretched as they awaited some form of explanation. The vet stepped out again, and Sarah's anxiety spiked. Minutes later, he returned with another doctor. Her entrance felt significant, marked by their whispered conversation and serious expressions. What does this mean? Sarah wondered, but the doctors provided no immediate clarity. They huddled around the ultrasound screen, focused intensely. Sarah's nervous fingers tapped against her thigh as she watched them, desperately hoping for some positive news about Oliver. The new doctor examined the ultrasound results with the vet, their eyes intense and focused. They exchanged whispers that left Sarah on edge. Each murmur seemed heavy with concern, making Sarah's stomach twist with anxiety. What are they seeing? She thought, her nails digging into her palms. They seemed oblivious to her presence, their attention solely on Oliver and the screen displaying his inner turmoil. The doctor's cautious movements only heightened Sarah's anxiety. She could see their brows furrow as they leaned in closer to the screen. Their gloves crinkled softly against the equipment, but to Sarah, it sounded like thunderclaps. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" she asked, her voice barely masking her frustration. The doctors continued their whispered exchange, their serious demeanour amplifying her fears. Sarah's breath hitched when she overheard the doctors mention authorities. The word hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. What does that mean? She wondered, a mix of fear and confusion gripping her. Her mind raced, imagining the worst. "Is there a legal issue?" she muttered quietly. The doctors didn't seem to notice her growing distress, too engrossed in the ultrasound and their hushed conversation. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Oliver's condition than she initially thought. "Is there something they're not telling me?" she pondered, glancing back at the trembling puppy. She wished she had more answers. Her concerns grew as the doctor's intense focus on the ultrasound continued. The ominous possibility that Oliver's past might hold darker secrets gnawed at her relentlessly. Their attention fixed particularly on Oliver's abdomen, scanning repeatedly and pausing often. The doctors exchanged looks that only deepened Sarah's anxiety. Why do they keep looking there? She wondered aloud. She couldn't interpret the images on the screen, but the doctor's serious expressions spoke volumes. The room felt stifling, each pause and exchanged glance between the doctors fueling her growing dread for Oliver. After what felt like an eternity, the vet turned to Sarah. "We need your contact information for future updates," he said, his voice calm but serious. Sarah quickly scribbled down her details, her hand shaking. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her eyes pleading for reassurance. The vet nodded, but his earlier distress lingered, leaving Sarah to battle her swirling thoughts and rising fear. The decision was made to admit Oliver to the clinic for close observation. Sarah's heart sank as she realized she had to leave him there. "We'll take good care of him," the vet assured her, but it did little to ease her mind. She glanced back at Oliver, his small body looking even frailer on the clinic table. Taking a deep breath, she nodded, hoping for the best. Reluctantly leaving Oliver behind, Sarah felt compelled to gather more information. She couldn't just sit and wait. Her mind buzzed with questions. "Who left you there, Oliver?" she thought. Determined to find answers, she decided to visit local shelters and neighbourhoods. "Someone has to know something," she told herself. Her determination fueled her next steps as she set out to uncover any clues about Oliver's past. Sarah's search led her to local shelters and neighbourhoods, hoping someone might recognise the golden retriever puppy. She introduced herself and showed photos of Oliver at each place. "Have you seen him before?" she asked repeatedly. Most responses were sympathetic but unhelpful, increasing her frustration. Yet, Sarah remained determined. She knew someone held the key to Oliver's history and was committed to finding it. Taking her search further, Sarah printed out flyers with Oliver's picture and her contact information. She carefully designed each one, ensuring every detail was clear. "Maybe this will help," she thought, plastering them around the neighbourhood and community boards. She handed them to shop owners and passers-by. "Please let me know if you recognise him," she said, praying for any lad that could help unravel Oliver's past. A helpful clerk at a local shop suggested to Sarah that she should check with nearby pet stores and vets. "Sometimes, pets get lost and are handed over to the nearest vet," the clerk explained. Sarah nodded, appreciating the advice. She felt a glimmer of hope that tracking down Oliver's origins was still possible. "Thanks, I'll do that right away," Sarah replied, feeling a little more confident about finding more information on Oliver. As Sarah left the shop, she realized that finding Oliver's origin might be more challenging than she initially thought. However, she knew it was necessary. It wasn't just about figuring out where Oliver came from, it was about ensuring he got the care and justice he deserved. She headed to the nearest pet store, thinking about her next steps and how she could make this right for the little puppy. Days passed with no significant leads. Sarah visited numerous pet stores and vet clinics, asking everyone she met if they recognized Oliver. She made countless calls, but each one ended in disappointment. Despite her determined efforts, she found herself coming up empty-handed. "Why is this so difficult?" she murmured to herself. Oliver, meanwhile, remained at the vet's clinic, his health slowly improving, but still surrounded by a cloud of mystery. Sarah's phone buzzed, startling her out of her thoughts. It was the vet calling with an update. "We found something peculiar," the vet began. Sarah's heart pounded as she listened. The vet explained they discovered an old injury in Oliver, something that predated his time with her. This revelation left Sarah with more questions. How did he get that injury? And why was it never treated? She wondered, feeling a mix of confusion and concern. The discovery of Oliver's old injury raised several troubling questions about the treatment, or lack thereof, he received before being abandoned. What kind of neglect did he endure? Sarah thought, her worry deepening. She couldn't shake the image of Oliver suffering, alone and in pain. The vet's findings added a new layer to the mystery, making Sarah more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Oliver deserved answers, and she was set on finding them. Feeling overwhelmed, Sarah decided to confide in her friend Karen, who had experience in animal welfare. "I think there's more to Oliver's story," she said, recounting the vet's discovery. Karen listened closely, her face serious. "We need to find out more," Karen agreed. They decided to revisit the spot where Sarah found Oliver, hoping to uncover any overlooked clues. With Karen's support, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to dig deeper. Together, Sarah and Karen returned to the roadside where she found Oliver. The area was quiet, seemingly offering no new information. They scoured the surroundings, hoping for any sign that could explain Oliver's past. "Look everywhere. Even the smallest detail might help," Karen said. Hours passed without any promising discoveries. Sarah felt her frustration build, wondering if their efforts were in vain. Yet, they pressed on, unwilling to give up on finding some clue. Just as their efforts seemed fruitless, Karen spotted something under a bush. "Sarah, look at this!" she called out. Sarah hurried over, her heart racing. Hidden beneath the leaves was a broken collar. Could this be Oliver's? She wondered aloud. The collar was worn with a partially visible tag that could provide critical information. Sarah's excitement mixed with apprehension. They bagged the collar carefully, realizing it might hold the key to uncovering Oliver's past. The broken collar had a partially visible tag, providing a sliver of hope. They examined it closely, trying to make out the blurred details. "I can see a phone number, but it's hard to read," Sarah said, squinting at the tag. Karen nodded. "Well, this is better than nothing. Let's get it to the vet. Maybe they have tools to decipher it." The collar was their first real lead, and they weren't about to let it go. They rushed the collar to the vet, who examined it closely. The vet's eyes narrowed as he inspected the tag. "This might take a little effort to decode," he stated, heading to his office. Sarah and Karen waited anxiously, hoping this clue would shed light on Oliver's origins. Minutes felt like hours as they contemplated what they might discover. The vet returned with a serious expression, clutching the collar. "I think we have something," he said. The vet handed the collar back to Sarah and Karen, pointing to the partially visible details. "See this? It's a bit blurred, but there's definitely a name and a phone number here," he said, squinting at the tag. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "This could be our break," she said, sharing a determined look with Karen. They knew they had to try calling the number, despite its state. With a hint of anticipation, Sarah dialed the partially visible phone number, her heart pounding in her chest. She pressed the phone to her ear, only to hear the frustrating beep of a disconnected line. "No way, it's disconnected," she sighed. Now what? Karen asked, feeling the weight of their uncertainty. Yet, their determination didn't waver. They knew they had to find another way to trace Oliver's past. Refusing to give up, they decided to reach out to the Animal Control Office. They may have records or ways to trace the previous owner, Sarah reasoned. She quickly made the call, her voice urgent as she explained their situation. The officer listened attentively, recognizing the gravity of the situation. This might be their last hope of finding out who had left Oliver in such a terrible condition. The officer on the other end of the line absorbed the details and promised to look into it. "I'll cross-check this number with our records and get back to you as soon as possible," he assured. Sarah thanked him, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "Let's hope he finds something," Karen said, her voice echoing Sarah's thoughts. They had done all they could for now and had nothing left but to wait. As the weeks stretched on, Sarah found herself checking her phone constantly, hoping for a call from the animal control officer. The lack of progress started to weigh heavily on her. "Why is this taking so long?" she often wondered aloud. Each passing day felt like an eternity, the mystery of Oliver's past remaining frustratingly out of reach. Sarah knew she couldn't lose hope, for Oliver's sake. Despite the lack of new leads, Sarah made regular visits to Oliver at the vet clinic. Each visit brought a mix of emotions. Oliver was slowly recovering, his wounds healing, but he remained quiet and seemed perpetually distressed. Sarah would sit by his side, whispering words of comfort. "You're getting better every day, Oliver," she'd say, trying to instill hope in both of them. His recovery was a small solace amid the uncertainty. The vet's updates on Oliver's condition grew sparse, leaving Sarah in a constant state of unease. No significant changes was the most she'd hear. This lack of concrete information created an atmosphere of uncertainty and helplessness. Sarah felt as if she was stagnant, unable to move forward in uncovering Oliver's history or future. She began to feel the toll of the weight, but knew she couldn't afford to lose hope. Determined to do more, Sarah started talking to more neighbours, handing out additional flyers with Oliver's picture. She knocked on doors, hoping someone might remember something. "Have you seen this puppy before?" she'd ask, holding up the flyer. Many were sympathetic, but didn't have any helpful information. Despite the dead ends, she refused to give up. Every conversation carried the hope that someone might know where Oliver came from. One day, an elderly neighbour paused thoughtfully before answering Sarah's usual question. "You know, around the time you found that puppy, I recall seeing a moving truck. The family might have just relocated," the neighbour mentioned. Sarah's eyes lit up as she thanked the neighbour, this detail giving her a new lead. She hurried back to Karen to share the information, their spirits lifted by this potentially significant clue. This new information gave Sarah and Karen a fresh direction to explore. They discussed their next steps, feeling a renewed energy. "We need to look into recent move-ins and relocations in the neighbourhood," Karen suggested. Sarah agreed, already planning their approach. This lead, as tenuous as it was, offered a flicker of hope. They had a potential timeline and a direction, and they were ready to follow it wherever it led. Following this new lead, Sarah and Karen began their investigation into recent home sales and rentals in the area. They spent hours poring over public records, making calls and jotting down addresses. It took determination and a clear focus, but they were driven by a deep need to understand Oliver's past. Each bit of information could be the key to solving the mystery surrounding the abandoned puppy. With persistence, Sarah and Karen managed to identify a few potential homes that aligned with the timeline provided by the elderly neighbour. They compiled a list and decided to visit each one. "We can't leave any stone unturned," Karen emphasised. Sarah nodded in agreement, mentally preparing herself for the door-to-door mission ahead. Every house they noted could bring them one step closer to uncovering Oliver's origins. Determined to find answers, they knocked on numerous doors, asking questions and circulating information about Oliver. "Excuse me, have you seen this puppy before?" Sarah would ask at each house, holding up the flyer. Many residents were helpful, some simply curious, but none provided the breakthrough they needed. Still, each conversation left Sarah hopeful that someone, somewhere, would recognize Oliver and share the information they desperately sought. Most encounters were dead ends until they approached one house where a young boy opened the door. His eyes lit up as he looked at the flyer. "I know that puppy," he exclaimed excitedly. Sarah's heart raced. She crouched down and asked, "Can you tell us where you saw him?" The boy pointed towards another house down the street. "I think he was there," he added, offering a glimmer of hope. Hopeful, Sarah and Karen approached the house the boy pointed out. They knocked and were greeted by a stern-looking resident. When asked about Oliver, the resident vehemently denied any connection, almost too hastily. Their firm and defensive posture raised suspicions. "Why are you asking?" the resident snapped, shutting the door quickly. Sarah and Karen exchanged puzzled glances, each feeling that the resident's reaction wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. The trail seemed to have gone cold again until Sarah's phone rang, displaying the animal control officer's number. "We've had a breakthrough," the officer said the moment Sarah answered. Her pulse quickened as she listened intently. "I believe we might have found a match to the phone number on the broken collar." Relief washed over Sarah. The search wasn't in vain after all. They eagerly awaited more details from the officer. The officer explained that the phone number matched a record in their database. "The number corresponds to a previous complaint filed in another county," he said. Sarah and Karen exchanged amazed looks. A match meant they were closer to understanding Oliver's plight. The officer promised to dig deeper and provide further information as soon as possible. This progress reignited their determination to uncover the whole truth about Oliver. The officer's research revealed that Oliver's previous owners had been flagged for animal neglect in another county. "This isn't their first offence," the officer explained. Sarah felt a mix of relief and anger. "How could someone treat an innocent puppy like that?" she remarked. Karen nodded solemnly. The revelation painted a troubling picture of Oliver's past and underscored the urgency to ensure his past abusers faced consequences for their actions. Sarah swiftly relayed the troubling information to the vet. "We found a match. The owners have a history of neglect," she reported. The vet's expression shifted to one of deep concern. "If that's the case, we must report these findings," he said with a resolute tone. Sarah and the vet understood the gravity of their discovery. Oliver deserved justice, and they knew it was imperative to take official action against the negligent owners. With Sarah's assistance, the vet began compiling all the data and photographs needed for an official report. They carefully documented every detail of Oliver's condition, including images of his injuries and the broken collar. "We need to make this as thorough as possible," the vet emphasized. It took time and painstaking effort, but they were committed to bringing the previous owners to justice and ensuring Oliver's suffering wouldn't be repeated. The official report triggered an investigation, bringing Sarah into contact with law enforcement. Officers arrived at the vet clinic, requesting detailed statements from Sarah and the veterinary team. They listened carefully, jotting down notes and asking probing questions. "We need to gather all the facts," one officer explained. Sarah felt the weight of the situation, but was relieved that action was finally being taken. Oliver's plight was officially recognised, and that gave her a sense of purpose. As the authorities pieced together the case, a chilling narrative of neglect and abandonment emerged. The detectives shared glimpses of their findings with Sarah. Oliver was left in terrible conditions, one officer revealed. The puzzle pieces came together, depicting a life of suffering for the little puppy. Sarah felt a mix of anger and sorrow, listening intently. "He deserves so much better," she said quietly. The story was heartbreaking, but it reinforced her determination to seek justice. The investigation highlighted Oliver's old injury, clearly visible in the ultrasound. The vet's earlier discovery showed untreated trauma that had caused Oliver significant pain. One of the officers pointed to the scan, explaining, "This injury looks like it was ignored for a long time." The room fell silent as the gravity of Oliver's suffering sank in. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. "How could anyone be so cruel?" she whispered, feeling a deep sadness for Oliver's endured pain. The authorities assured Sarah that justice would be pursued for Oliver. "We'll do everything in our power to hold the responsible parties accountable," the lead investigator promised. His words provided Sarah with some solace, knowing that the law was now involved. Though the road ahead was uncertain, the promise of justice gave her hope. "Thank you," she said earnestly. Oliver's situation was dire, but with the authorities' commitment, there was a chance for a positive outcome. Oliver began showing signs of improvement under the vet's dedicated care. His once frail body started gaining strength, and his whimpers softened. Sarah visited him regularly, and each time she saw small but encouraging progress. "He's getting stronger," the vet would note with a smile. These moments gave Sarah hope, knowing that better days were ahead for Oliver. "You're a fighter, Oliver," she'd whisper, feeling more optimistic with each visit. His recovery, however small, was a beacon of light. The investigation's final report unveiled a shocking discovery: an old, untreated fracture that had healed improperly. The vet explained, "This injury could have caused chronic pain." Sarah was stunned by the revelation. It was clear that Oliver's previous life was marked by neglect and suffering. "How could anyone let this happen?" she asked, her voice filled with emotion. The discovery underscored the need for accountability. Knowing the cause of Oliver's pain added urgency to their mission for justice. The clear evidence of neglect presented in the report led to the decision to press charges against Oliver's previous owners for animal cruelty. The authorities acted swiftly, understanding the severity of the case. "We have to make sure no other animal suffers like this," the officer stated firmly. Sarah felt a sense of relief, knowing that steps were being taken to ensure accountability. The decision to press charges was a crucial milestone in seeking justice for Oliver. As the investigation progressed, Sarah felt a mix of relief and sorrow. She was relieved that Oliver's suffering was recognized and that actions were being taken. However, the depths of his torment weighed heavily on her heart. "He went through so much," she confided in Karen. Understanding the full extent of Oliver's past brought both pain and determination. Sarah knew they had to keep fighting for Oliver's well-being, ensuring his future would be drastically different from his past. The authorities commended Sarah for her unwavering efforts in bringing Oliver's plight to light. "Your dedication made all the difference," one officer remarked. Sarah felt a blend of pride and humility. "I just did what any decent person would do," she replied. Her relentless pursuit had helped uncover the truth, ensuring that Oliver's story wasn't lost in oblivion. The commendation reinforced Sarah's resolve. She had given Oliver a voice and was determined to see justice through. Sarah vowed to ensure Oliver's future would be filled with love and care, a stark contrast to his past. She and Karen discussed plans for his full recovery and long-term care. "He deserves a happy life," Karen affirmed. Sarah nodded, thinking about the home she wanted to create for Oliver. "I'll make sure he never suffers again," she promised. As they looked at Oliver, now more playful and less fearful, Sarah felt hopeful. A new chapter awaited them. After weeks of anticipation, Sarah received the call she had been waiting for. The animal control officer had good news. They had managed to trace the disconnected phone number to a nearby town. The owners had recently moved and forgotten to update their contact information. Armed with this new information, Sarah and Karen drove to the address provided, hearts full of hope and trepidation. Upon arriving, they were greeted by a family visibly relieved to see photos of Oliver. They explained that during the chaos of moving, Oliver had accidentally been left behind. Overwhelmed with guilt and grateful for his safe recovery, they decided it would be best for Oliver to stay with Sarah, who had shown undying commitment to his welfare. Back at the clinic, Sarah hugged Oliver, her eyes teary with joy. She promised him a new beginning, a life filled with love and care, free from the shadows of his past. As they walked out into the sunlight, Oliver's tail wagged for the first time, a sign of brighter days ahead.